Boom. All right. It's definitely a little scuffed. It's super scuffed, but um first of all, hope everyone can see Progressive Brat. Um First of all, how are you doing?
Hi. Sorry. I have my laptop here.
By the way, you
And
said are you like out of town by any chance?
I am.
Okay, I figured that might be the case.
Yeah. I am, but hold on. I just told my whole entire Discord, like 300 people in there, to come on. Um, yeah, hi. I'm doing great. So sorry about that. I am not home. I'm actually in LA right now, but I decided to agree to talk to you just because we had said that we were going to do a collab, and I've just been absolutely terrible at reaching out with you to you. So I sincerely apologize. But also, everything going on in Iran, I really wanted to kind of be able to talk about it on any platform that's welcoming me. So I thank you for bringing me on. And yeah, I'm not at home. I'm in LA. I have a kind of created a setup here. And so I apologize. Let me know if you can hear me, if everything's okay.
No, I think your
But
audio is good. Can chat hear you guys? Like chat, can you hear her? Is everyone good? We good? We good chat?
should be good.
Okay, we should be good. Let me up your volume a little bit so people can hear you. All right. Okay, cool. I think people can hear us, but uh, my chat isn't super active, so they could be louder.
It's okay.
Okay, I just upped your volume a little bit. Okay, got it. Okay. So yeah, overall, like first of all, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of
Um
course.
yeah, so let's start off with this, right? Cuz so this is actually not like the first discussion I've had about Iran, what's going on in Iran. I've actually had I'm sure you're familiar with him, Pars. I've had Pars to come on Pars Kahai come on and talk about a little bit about what's going on in Iran, and he basically helped give us sort of a lay of the land of the politics of Iran, sort of the different demographics of Iran. Why is this whole thing happening? What are some like possibilities of what's going on? But what I think was really lacking from that sort of discussion and was an Iranian woman's perspective, right, on what is going on in Iran and sort of the culture of Iran in general, right? So I figured having you on would be a fantastic, addition. And I think hearing voices from Iranian women, especially in this particular time, is super important. Um, First of all, I just want to ask, how has this entire thing affected you? Like, if you don't want to get into it, but if you don't want to get into it, that's fine. But like, I'm just curious, like, how has this affected you? How's this affected your family? By the way, if you need any help from me, just feel free. Like, anytime, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help. Right?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for bringing me on. I will say I'm not very well versed, and we have so many different ethnic groups in Iran, and they all have different takes of how they're treated within society and whatnot. And so I'm not very well informed on that aspect of things. And so I'm glad you brought on Pars, but I'm also glad that you're bringing me on as well because you know, uh, I've had a very unique experience in the fact that I was born and raised in America, but I lived in Iran for a year in eighth grade. And so I went to school there. I was arrested by the morality police. I've gone through all of these experiences. Fortunately, I didn't have the same fate that Massa did or other women have as far as becoming assaulted and or raped or, murdered. And so that kind of gives me a very unique perspective when I speak about this because I'm not like other Iranian Americans who just go there to visit for a couple of weeks and then they come back, right? I've been there, I've lived there, I've gone through the whole 8 Mile, and I actually came back with a lot of PTSD. I was diagnosed with PTSD with anxiety disorder and manic depression, and I was put on antipsychotics in ninth grade because of everything that I saw when I lived there. So that's still something that impacts me to this day. I will say everything that's happened in the past week has been incredibly traumatizing. I don't think I had ever fully comprehended what everything happened to me that year that I lived in Iran was absolutely not normal. I think I just kind of saw my therapist, worked through it, and kind of, moved on. But when you're born and raised as an Iranian, you're kind of taught that, hey, this is just how it is. Whenever you go back, you just put on a scarf, you just listen to whatever they say, you don't talk about the government when you leave the house, and that's just how it goes, right? But
Mm-hmm.
this past week kind of showed me like, hey, this everything happening is really fucked up. Like this is not normal, you know? And so it was really just kind of hit me like a shock. And I know this might to the average American or the average person looking out, not even American, but anyone that's not Iranian looking inside, they're like, damn, you're not allowed to dance, you're not allowed to sing, you're not allowed to go outside without a headscarf. You get arrested and assaulted if you don't wear a headscarf, right? To everybody, that's like, oh my God, that's insanity, right? That's like hell on earth. But to me, that's what I was raised with, right? That whenever I went back, those were just the rules, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I will say this past week was incredibly traumatizing because I think, especially, and I'm sure you can relate to this, I think as a woman of color who's a streamer that kind of does have a platform, I talk about issues that my other counterparts speak about as well, right? And so I feel like for many people who are not POC or are not women of color, you know, they speak about issues and they're able to go back to their life and just kind of maneuver life the way that they always do because the issues that they talk about don't personally impact them. But for someone like me, I would do a 6-hour stream about Iran, and that was already just kind of talking about people that look like me, that speak the same language as me, that are my own blood, you know, going through all these atrocities, and then I'm just expected to go and make TikToks, interview with NBC, you know, do X, Y, and Z, and still maneuver through life like normally, you know what I mean? And so it's something that that also hit me as well too. That you know, there's doing the stuff that I do is a lot harder for somebody like, hi, Read and Rap, how are you? Doing something that I do, for example, or that you and I do, is a lot more emotionally tolling than something that, you know, a white creator, for example, does. And I think that's just the reality of the situation, you know? And
Yep.
so I went to Las Vegas the past 2 days and I just left my phone in the hotel room and I was like, for the first time in 8 months, I actually legitimately unplugged. And so it was the best feeling ever. I've come back, I'm completely refreshed. But, you know, it's one of those things, you know, you pick and choose your battles, and that's just the battle that I picked.
Yeah, no, that feeling I 1000 relate to, 1000% relate to, 1000%. Every time I talk about India, every time I talk about, especially what happened I was talking about Sri Lanka, about what's been happening there for months and months on end. And it massive, and basically what I did is I took just to generalize, like I took a particular route in describing like what was going on, and I tried to shed light on something that hasn't really been shed on, like that hasn't really been talked about all that much. And talking about the details of that really took a toll on my mental health. So I 1000% get where you're coming from. That's why I originally asked, like, hey, do you want to like not talk about this, or are you good? Like, Par says, salam, Ariana. Uh,
Oh, hi, Park. I'm sorry. I don't know who you are, but I'm sure we can meet
I
each
think
other.
he's a regular in your chat as well. He's a regular in my chat too.
Oh, he just became a regular a week ago, or a week or two ago. So
Gotcha.
actually, I know who Park is. Salon Park. Okay, I know who this person is. They just started coming into my chat a couple weeks ago.
Yep. So this is the guy that I actually had on earlier to talk about Iran. So
Oh,
yeah, this is the guy. So but yeah, it's super is yes, talking about this stuff is super exhausting. I like, and it is like it takes a mental toll on you 1000%.
yeah,
Um
absolutely.
so by the way, so how's your family? Are they all right? Have you been able to establish contact and whatnot? Like all good?
No, I have no idea. Actually, they once the internet was cut. I mean, there will be a couple of hours in the middle of the night where they'll get connection back, but it's super slow.
Mm-hmm.
They'll send a message. They'll be like, hey, we're good." But then that's like the only thing that they can send, like a couple words, just saying that they're live, you know. So I haven't been able to
Jeez.
have contact at all, actually. No noteworthy contact to where I'm like, oh, I have full updates now. The internet's still cut.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay, yeah, no. I'm deeply sorry. And if you ever need like any support or anything, just come to me, right? I've said the same thing
Oh,
to
of
Parse.
course.
I've said the same thing to Parse, and I'm saying the same thing to you. I offer my support whenever you need it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Um So just for the people in the chat that are just trickling in right now that might not know what's been going on in Iran for quite a while, could you give us an explanation on just a recap on what happened to Masa Amini or Gina Amini, a couple, week, what was it, a week or two ago? I
Last
think
Tuesday.
last Tuesday. Could you give us an update on what sparked all of this and why people are protesting in the streets, just for context?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Iran used to have a monarch. The monarch is very controversial depending on who you ask. Some people are pro-monarch, some people are not. I am not pro-monarch. I think the monarch sucked. The monarch caused a lot of diversion between different people. I mean, he was good in his own sense, right? The economy was good. America was having great relations with Iran, and we had great relations with Western countries. Going back and forth from Iran and Europe was incredibly easy under the Shah's regime. So you did have those perks, but a lot of our oil was going to Britain and America for free. They did kind of dictate whatever the Shah did was basically what America wanted him to do. He also created a huge divide between the Iranians that wanted to wear the veil and didn't want to wear the veil. So essentially, he created a society in which they didn't really accept. If you wore a veil, you were deemed as lower class or kind of poor, and if you did not, and if you unveiled, you were deemed as high class, and you were more propped up within society. And so all of these different things. Also, there was a huge wealth disparity that was growing and growing and growing under the Shah's regime as well. Same with this regime as well. The growth disparity, the wealth disparity is also happening too. And so, women, people, they decided to go into the street. And actually, the way that they were protesting was they were putting on the veil because they were protesting against, the monarch making the veil a bad thing, right? The women that would unveil started wearing the veil and protesting in support of their sisters that were chastised within society who wanted to wear the veil, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when Ayatollah Khomeini came on, and Khomeini basically gave a bunch of false promises, said some crazy shit like, oh, you're gonna have a free barrel of oil in front of your house if you choose me. Also, there's a lot of reports that him and Carter were best friends, President Carter at the time, so I wouldn't be surprised if some more CIA documents come out that he was also planted by the U.S., although that's not confirmed. And so, Khomeini, that's when Iran had two options. Iran could either go communist or Islamic regime, right? And so Iran went, Khomeini, his platform was completely Islam. So he came into power, but what people didn't know was that he was going to make compulsory hijab law, and nobody expected that. He didn't tell people that he was going to do that. And so there was a brief moment, I believe it either in 1979 or 1980, where he took away that law for a couple of months, but then he put it back, and he was like, no, everybody needs to wear the veil. If you're a woman or woman identifying, you need to wear the veil. I don't care what your faith is. I don't care what your religion is. You need to wear the veil, and you need to wear the hijab, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where the morality police comes into play, because if you make something like this into law, well, how do you actually enforce it, right? There's no way to properly enforce that unless you have police that are designated to enforce that. And so that's when the morality police comes in. You can be a woman or a man, you apply, you get the job, and you basically hit the streets and you police women on how they're wearing their hijab. Now, if you're a man, you can also get arrested by the morality police, but that's a lot less likely than they mostly target women and what women are wearing and how they decide to express their appearance. Now, the issue with this is that there is no hard line on what the hell the morality police deem as not a hijab or is a hijab, right? Women get stopped for wearing their whole entire leg is covered, but their jeans are too tight. Oh, your hair is veiled, your arms aren't showing, your legs aren't showing, but you're wearing really bright red lipstick, and we don't like that, so you're coming with us, right? Or it could be, hey, your hair's showing, we don't like that, come with us. There is no general consensus of what the hijab law or compulsory hijab actually is. And it's like Russian roulette. You can go out in the street for a whole entire year, no one will stop you. and then it'll be that one time when a morality police comes up to you and goes like, get in the bus, and that's when you're fucked, right? Also, the thing with morality police, you don't know who they are. They look like me and you. They just kind of walk up and down the street, randomly will grab you and tell you to get into an unmarked bus. Now, what happens when you get arrested is that they take you to an office and they do a education camp. And so they make you sign a paper and they fine you. But they say they re-educate people on how to wear the hijab. You know, a lot of reports come out that women are assaulted, women are raped. There was literally a story that just came out 3 days ago that a 15-year-old was arrested by the morality police and was raped by a captain, by a Iranian police captain. That literally came out 3 days ago. And so obviously there's no third party where I can actually verify this, but it was all over
Jesus
Google and
Christ.
stuff. So, you know, with Iranian publications, so, you know, God knows.
Oh, Christ.
You know, but these stories happen, right? Now,
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure if she was arrested. Actually, I take that back. I'm not sure if she was arrested by the morality police or if she was just a 15-year-old that was arrested, but she was raped by the captain, and that was confirmed by the general. So that did happen. Also, that area of Iran, I believe it's Zahedan, if I'm not mistaken.
I think. So, are you talking about Massa?
No,
Okay.
hold on. Sorry, I'm veering off, but yes.
No,
okay,
this is
okay,
good.
okay.
I mean, I think this is providing much needed context because I don't think we really talked, went in depth into like what like the real like what the main thing that triggered all this was. It was basically the fact that the hijab law was vague on purpose, right? It was vague
Right.
enough. It was vague enough to basically it's vague enough so that it's literally up to the cops' decision. It's
Exactly.
it's up to the morality
Exactly.
police's decision to do all of this, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
so we kind of got into this a little bit earlier, but I think Pars made the argument that I think Pars basically said that with Khomeini versus Khamenei, right? My understanding is that Khomeini, like Ruhollah Khomeini, is the more hardline of the two. Would I be correct in that assessment?
The way I've been explaining Khomeini, right, in Twitch terms is he's kind of the OG dictator, right? Like Khomeini is the first one that came in. So you have the supreme leader, and then you have Raisi, who's like the president of Iran, I would say. So the supreme leader was Ayatollah Khomeini, and then you have other people that have come in. I forgot their names, but like different, Persian governors. And so, right now Khamenei is the person that took over Khomeini's place. So they're not related at all. It just so happens that their names are super,
right,
close to each other. But I would say Khomeini was the first OG dictator that came in, and then now it's Khamenei that took his place. But actually, it's really scary because Khamenei is on his last legs of death. Like, that man is pretty much on his deathbed. And so there's reports that they want to make his son into the next supreme leader.
Yep.
His son has not been trained. I've also heard alleged reports on Twitter that he's escaped and gone to Canada. So if Khamenei dies, that's going to be a whole other shit show on who's going to fight to get that supreme leader position, right? And that's going to be really scary. So I'm also following that really closely. Khamenei just did come out, I believe it was today, to make a speech, and he basically blamed all of the protests on Israel and America. But he is still alive. He's alive. So,
right.
That's he's alive. I don't know if Mujtaba, his son, has disappeared and gone to Canada. I haven't been able to confirm that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there's a lot of misinformation flying around because there are no third-party sources to, corroborate things. But when he dies, that's also going to be a huge issue as well. So that's also something to look over. But as I was saying, Mahsa Amini, she was a Kurdish Iranian woman, gets stopped by the morality police, gets taken to a re-education center. Hours later, she's in the hospital. She's in a coma. Her CT scan was showing brain hemorrhage, and, her skull was fractured on top of, I believe it's called anemia, if I'm not mistaken. and she ended up dying on the hospital bed, which essentially sparked protests all across Iran. It's reported that over 400 people have died according to Amnesty report, but I would put it in the thousands, to be completely honest. There's no way to get actual numbers when it
Right.
comes to this kind of thing.
Right. Usually
Yeah.
usually governments fudge the numbers to make it seem like they're
Yeah.
not doing as much damage, but it's obvious like they
Yeah.
are. So obviously that leads in. So actually, I wrote a list of questions actually just to ask you, right? But that
Oh, of
actually
course.
so that lead no. So it's great that you said that because that leads into another one of the questions that I had. So this is like a layup. Obviously the whole idea that like obviously America has been involved negatively in Iran's history, with the
Right.
overthrowing of Mohammad Mossadegh, and because he, if I remember correctly, he threatened to or he wanted to nationalize Iran's oil fields, and as a result, the MI6 and the CIA did not take too kindly to that because American Oil Corporation actually it was BP that wanted to take over Iran,
Well,
right?
BP does own it now.
Oh, BP does own it. Oh well, okay, well. That's all settled, thankfully.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's just ridiculous.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
uh, but like so one of the things that I've seen popping up is that these protests are basically like CIA backed, right? Like, or they're directly American backed in some fashion or another because Iran made some geopolitical move that was disadvantageous to the United States. At what level do you think that America is directly involved in any of these protests? Like, I just want to get your take on this.
Yeah, I think that's a very fascinating question because, the 1953 coup did put Mossadegh under house arrest and gave the Shah complete power. I believe it was called the Iranian Petroleum Company. I actually made a TikTok about this a couple days ago. 40% of the oil to Britain, 40% to America. Well, actually, not oil. 40% of the company to Britain, 40% to America, 20% to Iran. And then that was in exchange for the Shah to have full power, obviously being America's basically bitch. I hate to say it, but that's really what it was. And so I think it's fair to assume that America has some sort of hand in this because there are reports that Carter and Khomeini were really close before the 1979 revolution. The CIA documents for the Mossadegh, it's called Operation Ajax. That was also released a couple years ago, which confirmed everybody's suspicion that the CIA had something to do with it. And then it turns out that the CIA was basically the head spear of that whole entire, coup.
Right.
So I think it's very fair to have suspicions. And, the question is, if they're not involved now, how are they going to eventually get involved and to what capacity? What's that going to look like? What is the result of that going to be? But as of right now, I lived in Iran right when the sanctions started to happen. So I haven't been back to Iran after the sanctions, but my mother, who was diagnosed with cancer 4 years ago, she had to go back to Iran for treatments because she couldn't afford it in America. And, the sanctions that have been induced by America, which started under the Obama administration, has put Iran under a complete medical apartheid. My mother saw doctors reusing needles, sterilizing and reusing needles. There was a wait list for chemotherapy. Diabetes medication was hard to find as well. There were reports of people dying because they just could not get their hands on insulin because of the medical apartheid that was happening. That's just one aspect of it. Inflation is through the roof. You have a population that is about 80% below 25 years of age. 60% of that population is completely educated, has gone to university. So we're not talking about a majority that is baby boomer or, millennial. We're talking about young, progressive. They've gone to college. They're forced to wear a veil, but they open their phone and they see everybody living their lives, right? So you're not living in this world where it's pre-digital age. They all know that they're living under a corrupt regime. They all know that what's happening to them is unjust. It was really just a matter of time of when they were going to stand up against it. When I lived there, when a morality police stopped you, that was that. You had to go. Everybody would just like, not my problem, you know what I mean? But now, in the past couple of years, when the morality police stops a woman and she starts fighting back, people start jumping in and fighting with the morality police and saying, like, let her go, who cares about her veil, So the whole entire culture and the mindset has completely shifted, right? This whole entire mindset, this culture that, we're not going to take this that much longer. Enough is enough. Now, given all of that is happening, as well as inflation, things are incredibly expensive, and there are no jobs, right? There really isn't any jobs because of sanctions. And so then the ayatollahs and the supreme leaders and whatever, they're all getting richer and richer and richer, and then you have the economic disparity where all the people are starting to get poorer and poorer and poorer and poorer, right? So that's also building frustration as well. Now, I think Massa Amini was kind of America's George Floyd, not in the sense that they're the same issue, right? Both issues are different in their own way, but it was the needle that broke the camel's, that broke the camel's back. That was when people were like, enough is enough, If it's not Massa or Gina Amini, who is it going to be next? How many were there before that you guys don't talk about? And, etc. And so I think it's just really important to understand that, yes, maybe America might have a hand in this. They do when it comes to sanctions, but I wouldn't necessarily be completely convinced that the CIA is against this, because personally, as somebody that has lived experience and knows people that live there, this frustration has been growing. It's been present. It was just a matter of time.
So that was the sort of read that I got from what was going on in Iran. This is a frustration that has been going on within within Iran for a long time. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was a previous like movement that happened earlier, the Green Movement that happened in Iran.
2009, yeah.
2009,
yeah.
Right? Because the Iranian youth were genuinely frustrated with the fact that they had to live under this regime. And it is possible for two things to be correct at the same time. Yes, the U.S. sanctions have really caused an adverse effect in Iran, right? And they've basically made it harder. Like you said, it's harder for people to get medical supplies, for people to get stuff that they need in Iran, right? But I think to say it's basically this is a CIA-backed coup, I think, or it's a color revolution or anything like that, I personally think it's a little bit too reductive. I personally think it's like
it is. It's really reductive, yeah, because the people that are dying, you have really young people in the street, like risking their life, dancing in the street without their headscarves. I think it goes beyond the CIA.
Right.
To be honest.
That's what I figured. Because I've seen that take a little. I've seen that way too often online, and I figured we needed to clear the air on that. So, I mean, I think you touched upon this a little bit earlier, but what? So just a cultural aspect, like what is it? So you lived in Iran for about a year, right? What was it like for you to live in Iran as a woman for a year? What was that? What was that like?
It was terrible. Yeah. I mean, I do want to kind of. Hi, Jasmine. How are you? I do kind of want to talk about what Boy Meets Minnie said. U.S. sanctions don't excuse Iran's authoritarian state. It doesn't, and I don't ever want to come off like I'm excusing their authoritarian state, but I will say it has definitely had a huge factor in the frustration that people are experiencing, because sanctions don't really impact the government or the elites. It impacts the working class people. And so, I think that's a very important component within this conversation as well. But when I lived in Iran, it was horrible, because I think the difference between me and a woman that was born and raised in Iran is that when you're born and raised in Iran, this is all you know, right? You know it's not right, you know it's authoritarian, you know it's fucked up, but it's all you know, and so you adapt, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for somebody that's born and raised in America, I was in 8th grade, so I'm starting to, hitting that age of, puberty and teenage years, and, starting to get to know myself and what the world, that whole, our teenage years, high school was a whole different, world. And so, my parents took me and they kind of plopped me there, and they were like, all right, like, you know how to speak Farsi, you'll be good, And so it was terrible. I was not used to wearing the veil. I didn't know anything about the Quran. I was not religious. I was not raised to be religious at all. So I was completely confused at what was going on almost all the time. And then, it's like, it came to a point where every single day I would leave the house in fear, because I would be like, is this going to be the day that I might get caught up by the police? You know what I mean? Because you just never know. I lived there for a year. I was arrested once by the morality police.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that happens, and then you get PTSD, because then you're like, who's a morality police, who's not, who's the Iranian, IRGC op, who's not, you know what I mean? You just don't know. You literally don't know, because they look like me and you just don't know. And so it put me in a state of hypervigilance. It put me in a state of survival. And also I was mad. I was an angry kid because I wanted to go out. I would buy a really cute dress and I would want to wear it outside, but I wasn't allowed to,
Yeah, you just
And so
wanted to be a kid, and you
I
weren't
just
allowed.
wanted to be a kid.
You
Exactly.
weren't allowed to be a kid in that sort of culture. You weren't allowed to be an American kid in that culture.
Oh, for sure. And it's not only that, but you know, all of the schools are girl only, boy only, right? Up
Yep.
until 12th grade, and then you go to university, but still you go into a big auditorium. This side is women, this side is men. So even though it's both genders, it's still separated. And so even that kind of built this kind of like, you know, this kind of urge in me to where I was like, well, I want to talk to boys, like there's no boys in my school, right? Because when you take away something from someone, they're gonna want it more, especially if you're 8th, 9th, 10th grader, right? And so, I had multiple friends, classmates who were in 8th grade who had boyfriends, who had absolutely no business having boyfriends. You're in 8th grade, but you're told so much, like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, that you go off and you do it because you're like, well, what's all the fuss about? And then there's no sex ed. There's no,
Mm-hmm.
it's abstinence only. And so that creates a whole other issue where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of teenagers, a lot of, middle schoolers that are going off and doing things that they're not supposed to be doing at that age. And if they are, they should be educated on what pregnancy is, what STDs are, X, Y, and Z. They're not being educated because it's abstinence only. And so these experiences that I had with my classmates, I just like, I was just like, oh my God, this is so crazy. Like you have a boyfriend and he's 19? Like what? I was so weirded out, but it was normal, and this is some things that people who visit there just don't see. You don't see the reality of how people actually act, how people actually maneuver in society. And so whenever you tell somebody don't do something, they're going to go and do it. It only does not work, right? We see it in America. Mississippi is an abstinence only, it's an abstinence only state. They are very heavily, majority Christian, evangelical, even, I would argue. And Mississippi has the highest rate of teen pregnancy. So it's not just Iran. You can see this example everywhere. Anywhere where you don't educate people and you just tell them to not do it, they're going to do it and then they're going to reap the consequences. So
Less in
it was
India.
just one of those, it was just a huge culture shock. I was just like, what the hell is this? I was constantly confused. I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, but then at the end of me living there, I actually conformed to them as well because it was like, well, because I would go to class and I would be, oh, you're the American kid, right? So then kids would make fun of me, right? Like, oh, you're the American kid, you're from America, you're not really Persian, you're not really Iranian. And so then I was like, well, fuck, how do I make them like me, So then they would be like, oh, we're going to hang out with our boyfriends at the park. So I would be like, okay, let me come with you. You know what I mean? So I would, and the whole entire time I would be in a state of anxiety because I would be like, literally, all it takes is just one morality police seeing all of us behind this bush hanging out with guys. Like, that's it. That's all it takes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there were a couple of times where they did catch us, and then we all had to disperse and run through the fucking park and run away. You know what I mean? So it was just,
Jesus.
it's just things that, like, I wasn't used to. It was just wild to me. I was just like, what is this? It was a complete culture shock, and it gave me depression, it gave me anxiety, it gave me PTSD because I was constantly living in fear
Mm-hmm. Jesus.
and confusion.
That. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's. I can't imagine what that's like living in fear most of your life. I really can't. I didn't have to deal with that at all growing up. I grew up most of my life here in the United States.
Yeah.
So I didn't have like I mean I've gone on my experiences with India in particular has been I've been on vacations to India. So that's like
Mm.
as much as like as far as I've actually went to school in India actually. I'm lying. I actually went to school in India when I was a little kid, but other than that like I never had to deal with like what it's like to like deal with like people looking be like I think you mentioned this on Gremlo's stream, which I think like really hit me, right? You like I think you said something about like always having to look behind your shoulder, like having one eye behind your shoulder. That struck a
Mm.
chord with me because that is something that I've never had to experience in my entire life. I mean,
And no one should, you know?
no one should have to do that. Like people should be able to
Yeah.
like people should be able to to do to live however they please without people like fucking without people like arresting them for like not wearing the hijab properly or not, conforming to the law or whatever, right? Or like not conforming to like the morality, whatever it may be, right? No one should have
Right.
to live in fear in that regard. Jesus, I'm deeply sorry to like I'm sorry to hear that you went through all that. Jesus.
Oh
Um,
no, it's okay. I mean, I only lived through it for a year, and I never
yeah,
went back. And I told my parents, I was like, I wish you didn't take me there to live there, because when I came back to America, I was like, you can miss me with that shit. I'm not going back, right? But other Iranian American kids, they're like, oh, I can't wait to go visit my family for a couple months. But me, that's like where a lot of my trauma stems from. I don't have that same experience of like, oh, let me go out there for a couple of weeks and have fun and blow a bunch of money on food and see family and then come back. All of my experience are rooted out of trauma, out of fear, constantly looking behind my back. And it was just, I haven't been back. So, yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, that definitely must have been traumatic. I'm sorry.
No, it's
Um,
okay. Thank you.
um, so, so could we like, so we talked a little bit about the morality police, but I don't think it's not just the morality police that implements sort of the patriarchal system in Iran. I think, Parse also touched upon like certain families also enforcing this as well, because I think one of the routes that he mentioned that this could take um, was that basically the protests die down because the central government uses force on the protests, right? Or the maybe like the IRGC uses force on the protests, right? And then what ends up happening is the current and again this is all hypotheticals that I'm listing for a particular purpose, but the idea is that they might move the route of enforcing the code through directly through the cops, but rather like through indoctrination. And so I just wanted to know, like, what is sort of that mechanism like? Like, what is the? Because I know that the morality code is enforced through the cops, but I think that's also kind of an important thing to note. How are the unofficial What are some of the unofficial means of enforcing this sort of thing?
I'm a little confused by your question. Do you mean like how do families enforce it?
Yeah, you can say like you can say families. I think mosques were also a part of this as well. Like how are how are specifically like non-governmental entities like trying to enforce it? So like basically the non-police entities trying to enforce these laws, if that makes sense.
So I don't know if I have an exact answer for you, because I think that would be a lot of speculation.
Okay.
Um, I will say Iran is very divided right now, right? You have a
Mm-hmm.
population that's incredibly progressive.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they want sex ed, they want to be able to date out in public, they want to be able to do all the things that essentially Americans, Canadians, and other countries are given the right to do, but they're not. So you have that, population, which is huge. But then you also have a population which I would argue is a lot lesser, but there's still, we all know that the less extreme is the loudest, right? We see that in America with super evangelical Republicans. They're not the majority. They're actually a small minority, but they're the loudest, unfortunately, with the most money. You can kind of think the same as Iran as well. If you work for the government, if you work in the IRGC, if you're a morality police, you're getting paid a lot of money. And so, and you, as a result, get to be the loudest person within society, right? And so I think that there is still a minority, outspoken majority, I guess, that are very pro the Islamic regime, right? They're not Islamic; they just call themselves that, but they're Islamic regime, right? And so I would say the way that they would enforce it would more so likely be honor killings, which we've seen. They're a lot rarer, but
Mm-hmm.
that has happened to people's families, children who are gay or part of the LGBTQ plus family. Like I said, that's a lot more rare, but it does happen, right? Another way that I would say they would enforce it is just snitch, like tell the government, like, hey, my son was out here at this time, and he took down this poster. I have film, or you could check his phone location. I would say that would probably be another way as well, but I would say that's very unlikely. I would argue that it's very unlikely that happens because, number one, um, Iran has very high intelligence, and so even if somebody goes to it, I mean, what they've been doing is they've been collecting phone data from people that have been going to the protests, and they've been busting down doors and arresting people who have been going to the protests, who have literally just been going to them. You know what I mean? They've been tracking, locating all these people. They arrested some of the soccer players who wore the black jacket over their uniform in one of the international games that they just had. They wore a black jacket over their uniform, you know, to kind of protest and stand in solidarity with the Iranian women. They were also arrested as well, some of them, from my understanding. And so I would say that it's the government is very, very, very powerful, and they're backed by oil money. I mean, I would say the biggest concern right now should be the government and the amount of money that they have and they will continue to have because it comes from oil. And so, you know, that I would, you know, honor killings and family snitching, like, yes, that's an issue, but the government has such a hold. I mean, Iran is, from my understanding, Iran is the only country that has power to shut off the internet across the whole entire country for the extended amount of time that they want to. I was listening to a podcast with the ex-CIA, you know, agent. I'm not a fan of the CIA. I was just listening to it. And he was like, yeah, Iran has spent billions of dollars, and they're one of the only countries that have the capability of actually doing that. You know, so you're talking about a country that's here to stay when it comes to authoritarian rule. And they've designed their government and their country in a way where they will be able to continue enforcing it until something really big and catastrophic happens. So, you know, I wouldn't say that would be my number one or priority worry, to be honest.
So basically, what you're saying is like, the government is likely going to stay in power. Like, no, I mean, it is. I mean, that's what I always assumed. Like, it is going to stay in power regardless. But I think I think you mentioned earlier, the thing to worry about is who is going to be the next, like, Ayatollah. Like you said, I think it was like, so who's going to replace Ayatollah Khamenei? And I think it was, I think the current consensus that's floating around is it's his son, is it not?
So, okay, that's interesting that you asked that because I thought that too. And then I did a lot more research and I realized that they haven't been propping his son up at all to become the next supreme leader. So I don't know. There's some people that are convinced it's going to be Mujtaba, but there's a lot of other people that are like, well, he hasn't been propped up or he hasn't been treated in a way where he would be given that spot. And so there's a couple of things to be worried about. It's that, and you know, revolutions don't happen overnight. You know what I mean? So these uprisings are happening and they're going to continue to happen. You know, I don't think the uprisings are going to go anywhere because, I mean, the government will suppress a lot of it and they have, but the people are fed up. You know, people are fed up. And now that they have that global support, you know, I think they're more amped up to do anything now than ever. But you know, at the end of the day, Iran is incredibly strong. You know, they have a lot of oil money, as much as nobody wants to admit it. A part of the reason why they've been able to survive the sanctions so well is also because of that oil money.
Right.
So, you know, you got the whole entire West, you got almost every single country in the world sanctioning you, and you're still surviving, you know?
Right.
And not in a Afghanistan type way of surviving, right? Like, not that there are things wrong with Afghanistan, but, you know, the infants are dying of starvation in Afghanistan in very large numbers. You know, different things like that. You don't have those issues in Iran. Why? Because of oil money, right? And so it's going to be very interesting to kind of see how this manifests. I was watching Christiane Amanpour, who I believe her title is like Chief Global Anchor, or
she's
one of
she's at CNN, isn't she?
Yeah. She's at CNN. She's one of the first, actually, arguably, she's the first Iranian anchor who made it global and is just like globally respected. And you know, she's been at CNN forever now. And so, you know, they asked her, they were like, "Hey, what do you think?" And she said, "It's going to take a lot more than this to take down the government. They're way too strong." And so she didn't agree with the government, but she also said, you know, it's going to take a lot more than what's happening now to take down a government like Iran. And I unfortunately have to agree with her.
That's kind of the reading that I got from my last sort of discussion about Iran. I think Iran is like you said, as much as America doesn't want to admit it, Iran is a very perfectly stable country.
Yeah, they are.
It is a very stable country, and it is perfectly capable. I mean, it's not doing that great, but it's perfectly capable without directly working with the United States. It's perfectly capable
Yeah,
of doing that, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Which is a thorn in the U.S.'s side, right? But I think so. There's another question that actually popped into my head as I was thinking about like what you were saying, right? And so I want to give a little bit of context, and I want to bring in Sri Lanka into this a little bit, right? So you're probably familiar with the protest that eventually threw out the former president of Sri Lanka and the former prime minister of Sri Lanka, right? But
Yeah.
what ended up happening as a result of all of that, interestingly enough, was that later on, what ended up happening was a lot of major political figures and a lot of people that were originally supporting the Rajapaksas eventually came in and co-opted a lot of the protests as well, right? And so, like right now, a story just broke out that the former president, Maithripala Sirisena, basically started standing with the protesters against the current government. So, do you think there is a fear in Iran about existing politicians coming and co-opting these protests to try and like weaken the strength of them? Do you think there's any sort of like rumor of that happening at all?
I haven't heard any rumors personally, but the way they're arresting everybody, yeah, the government's scared, 100%. They've been arresting random people. Like this one dude wrote a song.
Oh
His
no,
name was
no. So what I
Shirley.
was asking was, do you think there are people like do you think the people that are protesting are potentially scared of government infiltration of the protests?
Oh, that's already happened.
Oh, it's already happened. Okay, so just
Yeah.
wanted. So like in the sense of like there are people within the government that have already co-opted, like that are like beginning to co-opt this or like already standing with the like just
Yeah.
for okay, so that's already happened.
Yeah. So there's been multiple reports. Obviously, this is third party, so I
Right.
can't really confirm. But there's been reports that there have been multiple people in the protests that are not actually protesters. They look like protesters, they act like protesters, and they're just there to watch people and go and arrest them afterwards. So
Right.
yeah, that's a thing. Which makes sense because the IRGC when I lived there, you just didn't know who was an op. You know,
Yeah.
I had a friend that I went to school with, and she came into school shocked, and we were like, "What's going on? What's going on? Are you okay?" And she was like, "Dude, my uncle left his wallet in the house, and we found out that he was an op because he had the ID for the government." And we were all just like, "Oh my god!" And the dude owned a corner store. Everybody thought he was just like the corner store owner. No, he was an op that was placed there, owned a corner store, but also reported to the government on who said what in his store and stuff like that, right? You don't know because you'll become friends with the corner store guy you've been buying shit from for 10 years, and then out of nowhere, all you'll say is like, "Oh, you know what? Hey, like, dude, that guy sucks. Like, did you see what he said the other day?" That's it. Then you're done. You know what I mean? You just don't know. You have no idea who is an op and who isn't. That's how the society is in Iran. That's how they control people. I was
Jesus
always
Christ.
taught you when you leave the house, you never talk about the government. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter what they do. Doesn't matter how close you are. You never talk about the government to anybody when you leave the house. That was a general rule that most people followed because you just don't know who is what and who they work for.
Right. Jesus. Okay. So
Yeah.
the government infiltration has already happened. Like there are already people that are ops in the protests. And I'm
Oh,
assuming
there's
that's how
people that are
they're
ops within society.
Oh, I
Yeah,
mean, of
beyond
course.
protests, like it's a thing. Yeah.
Right. So I'm guessing like no, but like in this case there's no public politician that has come out in support to try and co-op the protests in that same sense. Nothing.
Not that I've heard of.
Okay.
I haven't heard of that. I mean, it may have happened. I just haven't heard of it.
Okay. Gotcha. Let's see. So generally, so I guess I guess like we can kind of move to this a little bit. So what do you think is going to happen? I mean, obviously, the protests are. I think we touched a little bit upon this earlier, right? But what exactly do you think is? I know it's like too much of an ask, right? I know like you can't predict anything, but generally within the track record of what like Iran, like generally what kind of protests have happened, like with regards to the Green Movement. I mean, obviously with regards to the 1979 revolution, right? What do you think, given the protests that have happened in Iran, what do you think is like likely to happen as a result of this? Because I think you mentioned that both you and Christiane Amanpour literally said that. I think you guys both said that this is, if you really want to take down the authoritarian government, this isn't enough, not even remotely close, right? So, what do you think there are any concessions that will be made as a result of this? Do you think anything can be done? Do you think the government will be forced to make concessions to the protests, like behind the scenes?
I think we're gonna be able to tell in the next couple of weeks, to be completely honest.
Okay, so
I will say a lot of the protests have been suppressed. I know that for a fact. But, you know, I personally think I would say my best bet would be that if we are lucky, the government would come out with a concession and say, all right, no more obligatory, hijab. I think that's very
that
unlikely.
that's too wishful
But
thinking. Yeah.
that's wishful thinking. Honestly, that would be the best case scenario, because obviously they're not going to step down or leave their power or control. Um, but I think, personally speaking, when you look at it on a larger scope, right? You know, Iranian people are mostly youth. 80% of them are below the ages of 25. And a lot of them are educated. More than half of that is educated people who are very smart, who are very capable, but they have nothing to hope for, right? I mean, getting married is way too expensive. They can't move out because everything is so expensive. Also, women can't move out on their own, so they're essentially forced to get married if they want to move out. A single woman can't even get a hotel room in Iran. I mean, it's very strict. You basically don't have any rights as a woman. I mean, you can drive and you can work and stuff like that, but if you wanted to do things outside of that, it would be incredibly hard to do. Although there's always loopholes for everything. I will say, I think the general consensus that was something that Christian Amanpour said, which also I completely agree with. Also, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting her. This is the first time that Iranian people and the women have come out in protest against the hijab. Even the 2009 protests, I mean, they were about freedom, but it wasn't the core issue wasn't the compulsory hijabs. And so, for the first time in the history of this revolution, you have masses of people coming out, taking off their headscarves and saying enough is enough, right? So I do think a huge societal shift is happening right now, which is incredibly important towards working for a revolution. And I think this is going to continue happening. I personally, if it was a population that was half boomer, half young people, or mostly older people, I would say, well, it's probably going to die out. But given that it's a lot of majority young people with honestly zero to no prospects to actually living the life that they want to live, I think this is going to continue happening. And cases like Mahsa Amini are going to keep happening because she wasn't the first and she's not going to be the last. And so, the report of the 15-year-old girl getting raped just came out 3 days ago, which caused a huge eruption of protests in the area where she was raped in. And, this is going to continue happening. And, they can only shut off the internet for so long. They can only, do different things for so long, right? There's going to be a point in time where they're going to start losing that control. And so, do I think they're going to get overthrown easily? No. Do I think it's more than likely, realistically, probably going to have to take an outside entity to be able to do it? Yes, I'm not in support of that, but just looking at it realistically, it would just be incredibly hard for people who are not armed. I mean, they're fighting, armed guards with rocks and stones. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just going to be a very hard thing to do. And so I do think the protests are going to continue happening. We're going to continue hearing reports of people dying, people protesting, people doing, rebellious actions towards the government. But I do think that revolution is going to take a while to actually take place.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, I'm just doing this from my understanding. So basically, what you're saying
Yeah.
is the the so-called like revolution that everyone is like generally hoping for, that's like a ways off, if at all, right? But I think the more important thing to analyze is what you're saying, which is Iran is a like vast majority of Iran is very young, which
Yeah,
is, and most people that are in that demographic are massively at odds with the ayatollahs and the clergy of Iran, right?
yeah,
So the makings of a particular revolution are possible, right?
yeah,
Some of it is already in place, if not most of it, right?
yeah,
So what basically this what you think you're going to see is basically you're going to see far more frequent protests and at greater possibly greater intensity, right?
yep,
So
yeah,
then so what you're basically saying is like it will eventually like spiral. It will eventually like become more and it'll become bigger and bigger and bigger until
yeah.
it reaches a breaking point. So there is a
I
sort of
think so. I
so
think
there is
so. And
something
the only thing
potentially to
that
hope
gives me
for.
that hope is the age of the population.
Right. That's so basically what you're saying is that because of the age, a lot of stuff has already been set in place because the vast majority of that demographic is at odds with the Ayatollahs and the IRGC, right? And the Quds
Yep,
Force and whatnot, right?
yep,
Um so uh so that I guess there is something to hope for coming out of this, right? There is some hope that eventually there is going to be a lot more protests. There's unfortunately going to be a lot more deaths as a result of this. It is going to get worse, but hopefully at the end of it all, there will be things that get better, right?
yeah. I mean, I'm very hopeful because of the population and the demographic, right? I mean, it's
Right.
very draconian. You know, you have this huge population of young people, huge population of young educated, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you're basically telling them wear the hijab because that's the right way of life. But then they all have access to TikTok, they have access to Instagram, they have access to Hollywood movies and American shows, and they're watching all this stuff and they're like, why do I have to live this way if all these people across different, nations are living so freely,
You're right.
And so maybe this sort of regime would have worked in the 50s or the 30s when people didn't have access and they just couldn't see how other people were living. But very hard thing to do nowadays because technology is very accessible and young people, if they don't have, young people, I mean, look at the civil rights movement, right? It was young people that really were, I mean, obviously all demographics played a role in that, but a lot of the sit-ins that MLK orchestrated, a lot like he depended on the younger generation because the younger generation were more likely to not have as much to lose than the older generations, right? Now we kind of look at Iran. I mean, imagine if America was 80% people our age and George Floyd would have happened. Whole entire nation would have been under fire, right? Like what we saw would have been 10 times worse because it was people like us that were out, that were the majority.
Exactly.
And so I was at almost every single one, and it was a lot of younger people, younger people that were tired, that were fed up, and so imagine this in a nation that is so full of just young, impressionable people that just want to live their life the way they want to live it. It's kind of a recipe for disaster for the regime.
So basically, they're like, even though the Iran regime is incredibly resilient, they will have a reckoning to come, basically, because like they've been doing this to its own They've been doing this to the people of Iran for too long, and people are fed up with this.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to be clear. It's probably going to take decades. You know what I mean? Like, I don't
Right.
I don't think it's
Yeah.
going to be
It's
anytime
probably
soon.
important to note
But
that. Right.
yeah, but in the grand scheme of things, and you're talking about. I mean, I don't mean to talk about my own people this way, but we're talking about people. We're talking about a population of people that have been around for years, right? Over 5,000 years, who are warriors at blood. Iran was colonized, was attacked, was a dynasty. You know what I mean? Like, you have a population of people that are incredibly nationalistic, and they know that they are warriors, that they are artists, that they are incredibly powerful people. And that is why the protests have been so intense because Iranian people, they don't play around. They really don't. It's just not a part of our culture. Like, when we're passionate about something, like, we are passionate about that thing, and especially when it comes to our country. So A lot of the people that are in the streets and they're protesting, they believe that the Islamic regime is ruining their culture, is ruining their history, is because for example, dancing in the streets is a huge part of Iranian culture. We love to dance. Every single ethnic group has their own type of music, their own type of traditional dance, their own type of clothing that they wear. Some of these clothings are unveiled. They're mostly, they're pretty modest, but some of them you don't veil completely. And what if you want to go on the street and you want to dance in your traditional, indigenous, music and clothing? And you can't. It's illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the people in Iran are fully convinced that this regime that is currently in place is ruining the culture and the heritage that Iranians have spent 5,000 years in creating. And so that's also a huge factor in all this.
It's just the pride that people have for Iranian culture, that,
Right.
that people have for Persian culture, right?
Right.
And like,
Exactly.
again, I feel you on that. Like again, I'll talk about my ethnicity for a little bit. Like the Tamil people are some of the most nationalistic people you'll ever see on the planet. I'm perfectly honest about that, right? In terms of like, not like, I mean, some of it is super cringe, but like, for example,
Yeah.
like, especially when it comes to like the language, right? Like, we don't even say that, like, so the language is like 2,000, 3,000 years old, right? It's a classical language, right? There's some words that are borrowed from Tamil and ancient Hebrew, right? That's how old the language is, right? That's how national, like, we will say that, like, so like we will say that we don't speak Tamil, we breathe Tamil. Like, it is within our breath. That's how much that's how much, for example, the language means to us, right? That's how much the culture means to us, right? We breathe it. We don't just talk about it. We don't just do this. We fucking breathe it, right? So I totally feel you on that as well, right? Just
Yeah.
as totally 1,000% feel you on that. Um,
Yeah. I mean, you look historically, right? When the Arabs colonized Iran, um,
right.
they changed the general. They were able to force people to become Muslim, right? Because Iran was not originally a Muslim country. But as hard as they tried, they were not able to change the language. They tried
Yep.
so hard to make Iran an Arab-speaking country, and people would lock away their books. They would put it underneath dirt and hide it and teach their kids Farsi because they were. I mean, to be fair, a lot of Arab words have been mixed into Farsi, but they were never able to fully change the language of Farsi. Farsi is a very unique language that is very specific to Iran. Now, Afghans do speak a variation of Farsi. I can understand them for the most part, but it's not Iranian Farsi. Iranian Farsi is very unique. And so, you look at a country that's so resilient, that's been historically so resilient. You add that, couple that with, over a decade long of sanctions, couple that with a population that's 80%, below 25, couple that with the population that really doesn't have much to look forward to because there is no working economy and everything is so damn expensive and the wealth disparity keeps growing and growing and growing. You've built yourself a recipe for absolute disaster, right? Now, that disaster is going to take a very long time to cook and brew and actually accomplish, but you're kind of fucked, So I think the Persian people, the civilians are screwed because a lot of people are going to die and get assaulted, and that's just the fact. But on the other hand, the Islamic regime is also screwed because you're dealing with a huge population that hates your guts, and they're willing to do anything to get that freedom from you. And they're also willing to do anything to keep that power. So, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just the future is very glim. It's very dark, but there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
In my opinion.
Things are going to get worse before they get better, and I think
Yeah.
that's a story that we've seen all across the world recently. I think in several other countries, I think right now things are going to get worse before they get better, but hopefully things do get better at some point. Um, so do you have any other? Do you have anything else that you want to add to this conversation?
Wait, we got a raid. We just got a raid.
Do we get a raid? Who gave us a raid? Oh shoot! Oh, thank you, Leonard, for the raid. I appreciate it. We're talking with Ari about Iran, and basically what's going on in Iran, sort of a women's experience in Iran, what's it like, and what can we expect going forward. But thank you for the raid. I really appreciate it. That's what we're going to be, we're talking about that at the moment. My mod Wolf of Qatarnada has like, I think Persian in his, I think your grandmother was Persian or something like that. He's Indian. He's currently in India, right? So
there's a lot of Persians that migrated to India who are Persian and Indian.
Yep,
Yeah,
Parsis. A lot of them are Parsis. Yep.
Parsi, yes. I had an uncle that was Parsi, actually. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Parsi, especially in like the Mumbai and Bangalore area. We have several like Persians as well. And also like the other thing is that like especially like North Indian culture in particular has been heavily influenced by Persian. It's been heavily influenced by like the maybe not specifically Iran, but the general Persian speaking sphere, right?
Yeah.
Because like the Hindi language is heavily influenced. Like you can barely go a sentence. Like you cannot go a minute without uttering a Farsi word. You can't. It's impossible.
Yeah.
You cannot go a word without uttering. You cannot go a minute without uttering a Farsi origin word. You can't do it, right?
Yeah.
There is a lot of like commonalities between Iran and India, not just in terms of like, obviously right now in India we have a Hindu nationalist government that is like doing a lot of horrible things to Muslims and other minorities as well. And again, that's a topic for another time, obviously. But I think as generally as POC, we gotta like stick together. I think we gotta support and build each other up. And I think what you've been doing with regards to talking about Iran is something that needs to be done. It is something that is incredibly exhausting. I can tell like from personal experience. When I talk about Sri Lanka, especially, it is an incredibly exhausting experience to go through, which is why I've taken a break from that. Sometimes when I talk about India, it is incredibly exhausting. So I understand that feeling. And so I do want to reiterate my absolute thanks for coming on this program. It's been a real honor to have you on this and spread and hopefully chat. I hope this was super informative. I know like Progressive Brat is very informative. And I'm almost positive you learned something from this. Like,
oh my god, thank you. Hold on, let me drop off and come back in really quick. Are you okay with that? Because I don't know why my camera is frozen. Like it's working for me, but it's not working for you for some reason.
Give me 1 second. I think there's something. Let me do one thing. I think I know what might be the problem. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna turn off my video, right? I'm gonna turn off my virtual camera, and then hopefully this should be good. Yeah, we're good. Okay.
Okay, cool. Okay, awesome.
It should be good.
Yeah, because I just saw myself like frozen in a very unflattering pose, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna come back.
No, like I'm still like getting like I've been streaming for about a year, and I still haven't gotten the full hang of like OBS.
Dude, me too. I have no idea how you did this. This is actually a very sweet setup, so I'm gonna have to connect with you and see how you were able to even do this, because I don't even know how you did this. But I mean, thank you so much for having me on. This was a great experience. I think you asked very, very, very knowledgeable questions. I appreciate it. I've definitely spoken to some people outside of Discord, and they've asked me some questions where I was like, okay, we're going to have to start from, ground base zero. So I really appreciate your questions. You definitely put a lot of thought into it, and I sincerely appreciate that. It means a lot to me because it does, like we did talk about, it does take an emotional toll to talk about these issues, and, giving that mutual respect of researching and asking really valuable questions is also, just adds value to the interview or whatever the collaboration. But guys, my name is Ari. I go by the Progressive Brat. I stream on Twitch every single night. I'm so sorry. I would have double streamed this, but honestly, I've been traveling across, so I wasn't able to. But I will tweet out your Twitch, and I will promo you, so don't worry about that. But yeah, my name is Ari. Thank you so much for having me on. I sincerely appreciate it. It's been an absolute honor, and we will 100%. I will bring you on my stream to talk about India and whatnot, because I would love to get your perspective on what's happening to the Muslim population in India, and a little bit about Pakistan too, because that's a wild country. But thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I go by Ari or the Progressive Brat, more commonly known. If you want to see videos of what's actually happening in Iran, my TikTok is a great resource. I've been kind of just blasting whatever I can on my TikTok. So definitely, if you want to go check that out, or if you just want to see my streams and whatnot, I'm off until Wednesday, but then on Wednesday we're going full blast into streams. So yeah, but Arun, thank you so much for having me on, and we will 100% connect. Hopefully, if you're free next week to talk about India, because by that time I should be in the. I had to literally drop everything and just go full force into Iran. So it's been a lot. So
No, I could tell it's taken a toll on you, and I'm glad that you were able to get this vacation that you really needed.
Yeah, I sincerely appreciate it. It's been a lot.
Yeah.
It put a very bad toll on me. I honestly there were two events that fucked me up. It was the Uvalde shooting and this. Usually I'm pretty able to distance myself when I talk about things, but the Uvalde shooting was very hard to cope with, and so was this one. So it's there's always those couple cases that really messes you up. But please, Arun, if you ever feel that way, Jasmine, you've been here this whole time. Jasmine, you are such a lurker, girl.
I think Jasmine said hi earlier. Yeah, she said hi earlier.
Oh, okay. Jasmine's a lurker. She's my mod, so thanks for being in here, Jasmine. But yeah, Arun, if I made the biggest mistake of not completely getting off my phone. I haven't done that for 8 months. And when I finally put my phone in the hotel room and I was like, you know what? The news is going to happen. What's going to happen is going to happen. I need to take care of myself, because if I don't take care of myself, I will not be able to save anyone. And I have come back and I have never been this refreshed in my life. And all it took was just 2 days off of my phone, off of social media, and it's wild. So chat, chat, I love you, Jasmine. So chat, if you ever feel like you are getting overwhelmed, just put your phone aside. I promise it's so worth it. It's so worth it. I wish I would have done it sooner, honestly. Was seriously suffering just a lot of intense emotions before I did that, so I'm happy I did it. That's kind of why this conversation was so free flow for me as well, because I was able to disconnect and kind of take care of myself. So please get off of social media if you guys ever feel like you're going down a depressive stage. I promise you it works so fucking well. It really does.
We all want to promote self-care in the Utter Not Know enterprises right now. We always promote self-care. We always promote touching grass as much as possible. We do not appreciate people that tend to not touch grass way too much. But yeah, no, in all seriousness, please, guys, do take care of yourselves. If you do need to take care of yourselves, please do it. There are times where I've been super exhausted, and there's a time where I was like, all right, I can't stream. I drove myself to exhaustion, especially because I start stream around this time. So I usually start stream at like 10. Actually, I start stream like 15 minutes from now, because that's usually when the Indian audience is like starting to wake up and whatnot. And then I'll stream until like 2 a.m, and then I'll sleep until like 7 a.m. So there's a cycle of like me getting barely any sleep. I was like, all right, I need to take a break. I need to take a week off from streaming, and I need to like just go do my own thing and just not worry about any of this.
Yeah. Also, if you're exhausted, the content you're going to be pushing out isn't going to be the same. Like last week I was trying to stream, but I was not reacting the same way. I wasn't giving chat the same love I usually give. I was like, dog, I'm struggling right now. And I honestly think chat could tell. Like, there was one point where I was like, guys, I'm so sorry I'm not reacting. Like, I just want to sit and watch, And that's like, people come to my stream to get, blow off steam, get news, kind of chat with the community and whatnot. They don't come on stream to be my therapist in the chat, So it's one of those things where, recognizing yourself, recognizing when you are getting burnt out. And this doesn't just go for streamers. This goes for anybody, right? Like, anybody within whatever line of work you're in, right? If you're starting to feel that burnout, take a day off, get off your phone, do self-care, because this whole, especially, I'm sure you can feel this as well. I was raised with this immigrant mentality where it was like, work. If you don't work, you're not going to get what you want. And, that's not true, because my mom was literally the example of the American dream, right? She started off as a Wendy's cashier with $7.25 an hour, and then she got cancer. She worked her way up all the way to a bank branch manager at Wells Fargo, got cancer, got fired, lost everything within the span of a month. So the American dream is fake. Doesn't matter how much you work, these corporations do not give a flying fuck about you. If you feel like you're getting burnt out, take a day off and get off your phone. Like, seriously. And don't touch grass if you're going to be on your phone and touching grass. Leave your phone at home and just go do something for yourself. I promise you, we're going to feel so much better.
Right. 1000%. This is advice that I think this is an advice that I need to hear. I think a lot of people, I definitely need to like get off Twitch and Twitter, or like, I mean, just the internet in general and Discord, obviously, for a little bit. Those are just all the platforms that I use. But like, yeah, 100%. I want to promote self-care for myself. I want to promote self-care for everyone in the chat. If you needed break, please go take it. I will be here, unless I'm taking a like self-care break myself. But other than that, I will always be here for you. Like, again, I'm always here if you need it. 100%.
Yeah, you as well. You as well. It's very emotionally tolling because Arun, this is gonna happen to you too. You're gonna grow and grow and grow, right? It took me almost a year to get to 2,200 followers, so it takes time. But you're gonna grow and you're gonna grow and you're gonna grow, and then something's gonna happen in India, right, or Pakistan or Southeast Asia, and then everyone's gonna look at you, right? And then that's the week where you're either gonna do self-care and get your shit together and service everybody the way that you need to for your people, or that's the week that you're gonna become completely depressed and have suicidal ideologies. Because that happened to me last week. It was bad. It was really, really, really bad. And I'm only saying this because I genuinely want chat to understand, you know what I mean? Like, nothing is worth your own life or your own self-care. And this week was incredibly eye-opening to me because, like, I had never felt this depressed, and I had also never gotten off my phone to the extent that I did this weekend. And so it just helped so fucking much. And also, it's not normal, right? It's not normal for me to be seeing a bunch of people screaming on my phone constantly and dying and getting shot at and stuff like that. This is something new. It's something new that comes with phones, that comes with the accessibility that Twitter and TikTok gives us. And so making sure that we recognize that, hey, this is a lot of trauma and we need to kind of like separate from it. You know what I mean? So, and it, like I said, Arun, I'm always, actually, I think you said it, but like you said, I'm always here for you as well. And anybody in the chat, just please reach out. We all have Discords. We all have communities. We're all here for you. Just literally let us know. You know what I mean? It's just that simple. Like, we're all always here for you. And also, another thing that's super important is that, reaching out to community as well, right? Like, when I put my phone away and I wasn't even looking at my phone, it was one of those things where I was able to completely recalibrate. And we don't understand the value of that until we actually do it, And so making sure that we do that, and I can't reiterate this enough. If you guys need community, come into our Discords, talk to us. We are always here for you. My mods are always active in my Discord. I'm sure, Arun, your mods are always active in your Discord as well. Like, you always have a community. The content that Arun and I talk about is very heavy. Like, the things that are happening in Iran is heavy. The things that are happening in India and Pakistan, they're very, very, very heavy. And so making sure that that the community is there, we're here for you, and that if you ever need anything, just literally put a chat in general and we'll all be there to talk to you.
Thank you. I appreciate all that. Thank you. I'm not gonna lie. I've been, I also had like a mental, not a mental, I had a physical health scare recently. So that's another thing that's on the top of my mind. So, yeah. So like that stuff is, I really appreciate those words right now.
Yeah, of course, dude. Anytime.
But yeah.
Don't kill yourself over Twitch, Arun. Like, you'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. I won't do that at all. But yeah, thanks. Again, we definitely should talk about, whenever you're down, like, I'm more than willing to talk about India. I actually,
let's do next week.
Yeah, next week is good for me. I actually don't talk about Pakistan all that much on this stream. So the two countries I've focused on traditionally were, India and Sri Lanka, because I'm a Tamil person. And so Sri Lanka is important to me as a Tamil person because there's Tamils in Sri Lanka as well, and they're the minority, and so that hits close to home for me. And obviously my parents are Indian in origin, so I was also born in India, and I came over here when I was a little kid. Um,
Yeah.
so like that's also like what happens over there is like what I talk about all the time. But yeah, if you want to have me on to talk about South Asia, more than happy to. And hopefully like I can be pretty informative on that as well.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to. Actually, I think if I bring you on to my Twitch, I would be able to extend you to a greater audience as well. Because even though I told my Discord to come in, it's still not, it's not the same. And I wasn't able to auto host you as well. Even if I did, I don't think it would have made a difference. So let's definitely connect. I do want to introduce you to my community on a grander scale. I'm sure they're going to love you too. And you talk about a very niche subject that a lot of people don't talk about. So I think that exposure would just be great too. But I also want to talk about the disparity that's happening with Muslims in India, and the government that India has right now, and how I've been seeing some crazy coverage, like people
Oh
doing
yeah.
the Hitler salute and stuff like that. And so
Oh yeah.
I wanted to talk about that, but I just don't feel like I'm in the right space. If I don't know much about a topic, I'd much rather bring somebody that does, rather than me just talking about my interpretation of it, which is probably not the best interpretation.
Hmm.
And so you learn that over time, right? You learn that, you're not an expert in everything. It's just better off if you bring other people in to
That's
talk about
precisely
things. So,
why I had Parse and I had you come on to talk about Iran. Like
yeah,
I wanted to talk
yeah.
about Iran for a long time, but I definitely felt like I was not the person to handle this topic at all.
Mm-hmm. It's
But
hard. It's hard. It's
it's
it's it's hard. It's complicated. And another issue is that there's just a lot of misinformation going around. I mean, even a lot of the things that I spoke about, right? Like I kind of give a disclaimer because there are no third party
yeah.
independent. I mean, I was on Gremlo's stream. There were over 100 people in the chat, and they were asking like, "Where can I verify this?" And I was like, "Dog, like you can't verify this.
It's
There's
an
people
evolving
sharing videos on
situation. You can't
WhatsApp, you know?"
verify it. Like it's a
Yeah.
constantly evolving situation where the internet is
Mhm.
completely blacked out. How are you supposed to verify anything?
Right, right. Like this isn't America where you get like PolitiFact or whatever. It's you're talking about a country that's completely cut off the internet, or using VPN to send videos over through WhatsApp and Telegram. Like it's good luck finding anybody that can fully confirm anything that you hear. But there are some main pillar things that happen that are fully confirmed. Right, Masa Amini or Gina Amini's death, the public outcry that has been followed from that death, as well as what we think is going to result in those protests in the long run. So those things you can talk about, but there's other things where people are like, "What's your third party?" And I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
There is no third party. Like if you can find one, let me know. But this is people completely doing freelance journalism and just like sending out the information.
Right. It's people doing the best they can given the shit hand that they've been given at the moment, and you
Right.
can't verify
Yeah.
anything, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
really want to thank you for having for coming on and enlightening my audience on like what's been going on in Iran for like the past several weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully there obviously we talked about how things are going to get worse before they get better, but if there
Mm-hmm.
is something to look forward to, there is the possibility of it definitely like there is a possibility of it getting better at some point in the future, and hopefully that's what we have to hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. When I look towards my left, I'm looking at your chat and I'm reading the chat. Yeah, you're right. About 80% of the population is below 25. About 60% of the population is educated. So you have a lot of highly motivated people in the country that are ready for change. It's just a matter of when and how that's going to happen, and how Western forces are going to play a part in that. I can't really say anything. I don't know how long it's going to take, or how other outside entities are going to play a role in this. But there is hope in the fact that the population is just so young and motivated for change.
Right. And that I think that's something to hope for. Globus the Elder wants to ask, like, if I may ask, what is your opinion? I don't know if you've read this before. American Iran: A History 720 to the Present. Have you read that book before?
No.
Okay, so there's your answer, Globus. um,
Sorry, I haven't. I wish I did, but I haven't.
no, the Arun on No Clips Industrial Complex promotes self care. Yes, Chatter Boy Meets Mini said that. But yeah, no, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. and especially after like everything that you've personally, I mean, this has taken a toll on you, and I really appreciate like having Recharge giving me a platform to talk about this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's weird, you know, when this happened, I had so many Twitch streamers reach out to me and I was like, crap, I'm kind of one of the only people that does what I do on this. Not to be like, you know, self-righteous or anything, but it's an odd experience when a lot of people, you're the only one that's Persian and talks about politics, and then everyone kind of just like looks at you and is like, "Hey, come on my show," you know? And it was just very overwhelming last week. It was a very hard week. I would probably say last week was the hardest week that I've ever experienced within my content creation journey. Just because so many people, I mean, to be completely honest, I ain't shit, but like I do have a following. I do have a lot of contacts within the content creation world, and people that were looking to me for information and whatnot. And it was a lot of that. It was that pressure on top of the general trauma that the Iranian people were going through that really just made last week really chaotic and hard to deal with. But, you know, once again, I appreciate you for bringing me on. I would love to bring you on next week, so I'm definitely going to Discord message you and we can set that up. But yeah, thank you for bringing me on, and thank you for actually bringing on a Persian woman, right? Because I think our perspective is very important, especially in times like these.
Yeah, that's why I specifically reached out to you in the first place. That's why I figured you were probably one of the better people to ask on this whole situation.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you coming on to talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Arun. You guys can find me at The Progressive Brat, and I will message you separately to set up a time. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
anytime.
it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, of course. Bye, guys. Have a good one.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
Arun.
No, wait, no,
Okay,
I'll
bye.
be on. Wait, what are you talking about?
Oh,
All right.
I'm leaving. I'm
I know,
leaving.
I
You
know,
will be
you.
on.
No, I know you're leaving, but I'm staying on.
Okay, cool. Bye, guys. Have a
See
good
ya.
one.
I got.